Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Valiuco and welcome to Personal Pans, conversations about belief, transformation, and all the weird things we experience. Today's episode is with Emmy Colón-Geistlinger, who, aside from the fact that she's a personal friend and someone I respect a lot, she is also a medium, a witch, and a death doula who operates from an intersectional perspective. This was just a very calming conversation, even though we were talking about very heavy things. She talked about her practice, working with the Akashic Records, also how living in a pandemic shaped her death doula work. She was also very open about, being a queer Puerto Rican witch and not really feeling like she belonged anywhere, which is probably why she also created the Wharf, which is a space for conversations and healing about grief. And I'm gonna link that in the description along with all of her links. Find her online; she's fantastic. Without any further ado, here's our conversation.
No, which is also like my bag. I appreciate, like, this sounds so weird to say out of context, but you get it. It's so refreshing to talk about trauma because I bring this up in two areas, like one, like my spiritual work, but also like my day job. It was so refreshing in the beginning of the pandemic when my colleagues could just say, I can't do any of this right now. None of this really matters right now.
Yes,
And I'm like,
exactly.
fair. Yeah, like we don't know what any of this is. And the sweet summer children that we were thinking, like, we're gonna flatten the curve in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, I know.
Like it's so laughable to think about now.
It is, yes.
But yeah, and I'm like, you do you. Like, do you want me to send you a meditation? And she was like, yeah. So it really transformed my job a great deal. It's crazy.
It's well, and this is one like, it's hard to say like, oh, what's good about the pandemic, but like this idea of the stress and the grief hit everybody, and this awareness of, oh, all the things that we've been doing and just accepting as part of our daily lives. Is this okay? Is this what we really want to continue doing? Is this anything? Like, is like, so many people want to like go back to normal. It's like, well, what is normal? And do we really miss normal all that much? Right? Like, normal was, again, not paying attention to your body, not listening to trauma responses, just kind of like keeping your head down and working and getting through it. And like, okay, I get it. That's how my grandparents survived World War II, right? They were just like good little workers, so the Nazis wouldn't kill them. But that trauma was with them for the rest of their lives, right? So to have this greater awareness and this greater conversation about trauma, like, to me, I'm happy about that, because we're all dealing with it in one way or another. And to act like it's not happening, it does everybody a disservice. Yeah.
Totally. I had a brief conversation, like it derailed the check-in with my boss a little bit. But we were done talking about work. Let's talk about real stuff.
Yeah.
I just hit a point where I heard kind of what they were saying, and I'm like, there's PTSD, like the big T trauma, there's little T trauma. And little T trauma is realizing that a few years ago, you could go and be in a park with a bunch of people and not even think twice about it. And now you're wondering, like, are they too close to me? Like, little moments have now transformed into potential sources of danger.
Yes.
And the little T trauma is like, you think about it and you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but you're able to navigate it without too much dysregulation.
Yes.
Big T trauma is like kind of the big stuff that I went through. Like, I couldn't cross the street for a while because I was afraid that COVID was on the other side. So I'm like, oh, that's agoraphobia I got to deal with before we get too out of hand.
God, seriously, yes.
It's crazy.
Yes, but
better now, but still, like,
thank goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
I know, but God, I mean, it's just, that's the thing. It's like, we're not meant to deal with this much constant trauma, and now I can't even imagine like what it's to be in Ukraine right now, and to like your entire life is disrupted, right? You're having to flee to other countries. Like, you know, Ireland, thankfully, is just like, yeah, no visa requirements. You get here, like, come, you know.
Right.
And it's again this like daily stress and this wonder of like, what's next, what's going to happen next, you know.
Right.
And you don't have the safety of those small little comforts of going to a park with somebody, right? Or having a friend over for coffee, because even if they're vaxxed and boosted, what if they're carrying something, you know? And now knowing several people who have had COVID and are dealing with, I think with one exception, everyone I know who has had COVID is dealing with long COVID in some way or another, right? It's either coughing months out, having trouble walking up the stairs. And these are people who did not have respiratory conditions beforehand, other autoimmune conditions, but not respiratory issues. And that fear of like, oh, I had pneumonia as a kid and I went to the hospital. What would happen to me? And like having to vet everything. People are inviting me to birthday parties. I'm like, yeah, no. Like people I love, I'm like, sorry, no, I can't. Yeah. And to know that our lives have changed so dramatically in such a short amount of time, and having to make all those little navigations, and the fact that we don't have a language about this. I feel like especially like white American culture does not have a language around trauma, coping. Like it's just like this expectation that we're all bulletproof and you know, we will all whatever, you know, this is other people have to deal with it. And it's like, no, friends, all of us have to deal with this and talk about it, because if you don't, you just go home and they're just seething in your own brain, you know?
Yeah.
I
had written about this, like a snippet of it in a piece I was asked to write. So much happened again, like we had great aspirations for this anthology, and there were a lot of great things that came out of it. Like the mayoral candidate Amara Anya, she wrote something, and it's beautiful.
Amazing. Yes.
So I loved that I was invited, and I'm glad I did it, because it took me so long to write, because things just kept happening.
Yes.
And I realized, like, by the time that, like, I eventually realized, like, I just got to get it done, because by the time that I wait for maybe something to calm down, more is going to change again. And then I have to do a rewrite anyway. Yes. So how about I just write it?
Yes.
With the like I'll publish it. I put it on my website, so it exists somewhere, because I think it's still valuable information.
Yes.
And I'm going to look back at it maybe in a few months or so to see if I do want to revisit anything. But yeah, it's like everything just kept changing. Like, and some things are still consistent, but one of them is the historical piece of, we were so good. Like we had a lot of like hip things we did in America around death and dying, that I'm like, y'all had that, and then you ruined it by giving it up to industrialization, like the funeral complex and everything.
Oh my God, exactly. And, yes.
Yeah, I'm like, there is it was called Death Becomes Her. It was like an incredible exhibit at the Met.
Oh, really?
And it was, I'm so sorry I missed it, but all of those like decadent, like funeral garb outfits that they would wear back in the day, like they're pristine, and they had them up.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yes.
Like imagine how much more, like how we have outfits that make us feel like uplifted. Like this is my like getting stuff done outfit. Am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Yes, you are. You're encouraged
okay, good.
to. Yes.
I asked because I was on the radio first a few times, like early into my death doula career.
Yes.
So that was a big thing. It's like, you're on the air, you can't be cussing. And I'm like, okay.
Exactly.
Just going so hard.
For YouTube's algorithms, I think you shouldn't swear like within the first minute or so, but then it's fine. And we've passed that. So you say whatever the fuck you want.
Okay, good. Ha, suck it. Okay. That's why people are like, you have a voice for radio. I'm like, oh, thanks, but I can't curse. So I feel like it's not my full voice.
Oh, yeah.
It's still filtered.
Exactly. Reined in.
Yeah.
Repressed.
Man. Oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a time. I felt like there was going to be a moment where being a death doula would feel like so timely, because it felt like we were building up to it with like public events and all that. I didn't realize, like, no one could have thought at the time that we would become beneficial to society in a very deep way. So it fundamentally changed how I approach the work.
Oh my God, of course. Yes. That, and because that's the thing too, it's like, even if you haven't directly lost somebody because of COVID, I feel like it's all these different layers of it, right? Like people who have specifically lost somebody to the virus, people who lost someone during the virus and then couldn't like be with them in the hospital or have a proper funeral, you know, like they couldn't, like their grief was kind of cut off from having full expression because of all of the precautions in place. And then of course, as we talked about, like the looming fear of death, of sickness, of illness. And again, like all these different layers of it. And again, just this like inability, unwillingness to have the conversation. I feel like so much in our society is built around like not even having the conversation of death, and to be confronted with it on a daily basis. I think that's what's causing like the major cognitive dissonance in a ton of people. Just like, I don't want to die, but that's never going to happen. Like, okay, friends, there's a way to navigate this a little healthier. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think you know, and getting personal too, like over Thanksgiving, like that Monday, my dad had a pretty bad heart attack, and it really it changed everything in so many ways.
Yes.
And you know, he's still recovering, and
Yes.
it's a process.
Of course it is. Yes.
Yeah. I found myself getting irritated, like the most random things, but one that like is still happening. People who I think forget who I am say like, well, you know, your parents are going to be around forever. And, you know, at least like, you know, I hear that it's dysregulating to hear that you're going to get like this money when they die and this and that, but you know, at least you'll have the money. And I'm like, first of all, who do you think you're talking to? Like, Literally. Did you forget who I am? It's like, well, people come to talk to me about death, so it I don't know if it's ever occurred to me that my family would die eventually. It's like, excuse me, what? Okay, so I check them in that moment. It's like talking to a doctor about how to diagnose cancer. It's like, I'm sorry, no. Please back up. I respectfully ask that you back up in this moment.
Oh my God, for real.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I've been, that's kind of where I am now, like telling people to pump the brakes, and
of course,
and reminding them like, is the money nice? Yeah. Like,
yeah, of course.
Who doesn't like money? But you know, that's not how I wanted to get money. And that's not how I wanted to. Like this whole like bootstrappy thing that we're into in society is like, no, people die and then you get their money, and that's how you amass wealth if you don't have like a good job.
That's exactly it. Yes, right. And so much about like good jobs is being connected from having parents who had money, and yes, exactly.
The sequence continues.
Exactly. Yeah. Like this complete unawareness of all the social structures that are in place to like maintain wealth at a particular level and prevent people from getting into those levels, those tiers of society, right? Especially people of color, especially women, especially fill in the blank, you know, the one of the groups that are discriminated against literally every moment of every day, you know, like it is this protective sphere, right, of influence, right? Yeah.
But yeah, it was so eye-opening, because I think I realized just how much I was living. There's so much about who I fundamentally am in so many ways. It's been yelling at me for years. So like, just stop trying to live this way. Like, it's clearly not working.
Yeah.
You're not happy. I'm like, it'll be fine. I'll be happy when I get over this hump. And it's like that lie, like, we just got to get through this hard week. It's all going to be better. I'm
oh my
like,
God.
no,
Right.
it's not.
Right.
You got to figure out how to be happy today, because it's not going to get better.
That's
It
exactly
could.
It could.
It
Yes.
But just hoping for like a magical, like, the snow's melted and you have nothing else to worry about. Like, no.
Literally that. Exactly. I know. And I do think part of that is also a trauma response, because that it's just like, okay, how do you get through? How do you get through? How do you get through? And especially when you are living in a situation where there is constant trauma, you can't, it's so difficult to think about your happiness or to think about what you really want. It's the paradox is like, that's the time it's most necessary to think about those things, because in those moments of crisis, and especially now, I feel like so much is kind of up in the air in terms of people really deciding how they want to live, the structures they want to support, the like so much pushback against a lot of things, that now is the time to start envisioning and imagining, like, okay, how do I want to live? Like, what do I really want to do? Does this really matter to me? I just, again, I'm on Twitter like way too much, but seeing somebody post, I got retweeted into my feed of this lawyer who, like, the opposing counsel asked for an extension because they were quitting law to start a farm. I was like, yes, more of this, please.
Yeah. It's also just smart.
Yeah.
Like, I came across an infographic about just how much the cost of things like consumer goods is soaring.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, it's a convenient time that I like matcha, because the cost of coffee is really going up.
Exactly.
So thank God my taste buds cooperated with inflation this time. But I cannot like,
Yeah.
especially like I've been following a functional medicine detox after some mold exposure and other health things that happened, like a cycle of like antibiotic steroids, and it was not a great time.
No kidding.
So it's been a process, and I'm like, great, everything that I have to eat is now way more expensive.
Cool.
So I'm like, I'm Googling how to grow kale in Chicago. Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's the cool thing about like the rise of community gardens too, of just like, yeah, we all need this food, and we can't all be beholden to these global supply chains, which clearly we're holding on by a thread and are just have been decimated for the past 2 years, and also just getting people back. I feel like too that, because I definitely grew up with this sensibility of, okay, my grandparents lived through World War II. They were refugees. My mom was a refugee. They lived in England. They came here. They didn't want me to have to deal with any of the struggle that they dealt with. But the problem in doing that is that they also didn't teach me how to do anything, like high tier emotional stuff in terms of like managing people with untreated mental illness, like became a pro very early, still a pro, but basic things, again, my grandparents both lived on farms. Like they knew how to raise food. Like my grandmother had a garden for as long as she had a backyard, and to not teach those very important skills that connect us to who we really are and what we really want. Like I've mentioned this, I feel like every episode, but I have like all my plants. I've got like 30 plants now, and it's just been such a delight to like get into the soil and pay attention, like, oh, the leaves on this one are a little crispy, I need to up how often I water this, or like, oh, this one looks, the soil looks damp, I'll leave that one alone, and just like adapting to all of that, propagating plants, like that's part of who we are, right? And we're just alienated from everything. Food growing, even just like plants for joy, it's plastic, right? Plastic. We're just constantly surrounded by plastic. And I think people are just like, I don't want to do this anymore. This sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. I know. Exactly.
I keep coming back to this. Like I'll flip my hand over my heart and I feel
Yes.
like I literally feel the weight of the world.
Oh my God, of
And I'm
course.
like,
Yes.
and then the exhale of it all.
Yes.
But yeah, I've
Yeah.
with everything that happened, like I
Mhm.
couldn't just hunker down in my apartment
Of
and
course.
just
Yes.
kind of do what I feel like was important for me to do. Like
Mm-hmm.
I did some spell work around him,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up kind of creating a little bit of like an astral line where I could sense how he was doing, even when he
Mm-hmm.
was in no position to tell me.
Yes, right.
And yeah, there were some things that just were difficult to hear at the time while he was in the hospital, but also unsurprising in light of
Yes.
like just the system in general. But
Yeah.
yeah, like it didn't feel dissimilar to being a doula for like someone with like dementia or things like that. Because like when you're on so many medications, you
Yes.
just say so many things.
Uh,
And in that moment, it's like, oh, that's correct. I'm like, wow, Dad, that's crazy. Like, yeah, wild. And I'm like,
mhm.
I need to go drink water. And then I go and I flag down an ICU nurse. They like throw a chair at me. They throw like apple juice at me. And
Yeah.
then I just like breathe. I crouch down. I'm like, ah, it's fine.
Of course. Of
Exhale.
course.
But yeah, there's a really
Yes.
powerful thing that I've
Mm.
tried doing that's been very helpful. There's the polyvagal sort of theory that I love.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't love my singing voice. My husband
Mm.
thinks it's good. I don't love it.
Sure.
I blame the fact that I'm a contralto, like I'm the lowest voice, like
Oh,
I,
sure.
which you could hear, like I
Yes.
have a
Oh,
deep voice,
yes.
and it doesn't change when I sing.
Yeah.
And I love it in other people. Like he said, if you can get voice lessons and then learn like Florence and the Machine, everything, you'll sound great. I'm like,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
When I feel like learning,
Yes, exactly.
when
When
I
you're
feel like
able
being
to
picked
take that
up,
on. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, like give me like in spring. I think I might be more receptive to
Of
like
course.
nurturing that, but not right
Yes.
now.
Yes,
But
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a time.
I can
So
only
yeah,
imagine. My God. Yes.
yeah, I went deeper into my tarot practice, which I've been kind of
Yes.
like as people need it.
Yes.
Um, and I've heard people like I've gotten my Akashic Records read for me a few times, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
got better about reading it myself.
Oh,
And then I read
cool.
for a few other people.
Yes.
And in all of this, I'm like, oh, I need to go back to that. And
Yes.
I love it so much.
Mhm.
I think what throws people is like there's a prayer you have to say. I'm like, it's chill. It's more of a mantra than a prayer.
Yes, right.
And the trip is like you could technically access them without doing the mantra. It just
Mm.
requires like a better meditation practice than the regular people have.
Yes, of
So
course. Yes.
they created it to like bypass a lot of that.
Of
So
course.
and anyone else could like
Yes.
go and do it.
Yes.
Which
It,
having ADHD is very helpful. It's like
yeah.
just get me there and I'll be fine.
Oh my God, exactly. Exactly. It's so rough too. And it's like on the one hand, I understand it because my mom is evangelical, right? So
Mm.
prayer is a very Christian word for me. And that can cause a little bit of spikiness in me.
Mm-hmm.
But really, prayer is a way of grounding yourself, getting centered, focusing. And again, that focus, that mantra, right? It's a little initiatory experience so you can access this higher experience. I don't see anything, like when I talk myself through it, I'm like, it's fine, pray. Like, it's okay. You pray to whatever, pray for whatever, like do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I too have Catholic guilt that I'm still slowly chipping away at.
Yeah, of
And
course.
my husband Tim, he is a seminarian. Like
Mhm.
he's gonna go be a Lutheran pastor, but at
Incredible.
the end of it
Yes.
all.
Yes.
So, it took me a while to realize that prayer could look different than what I have seen.
Yes.
Because I feel like there's so much about Christianity that feels weaponized is the big thing.
Absolutely.
Therefore,
Yes.
prayer must also be something violent in some way.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. And for me too, it's the idea of violence, but also the idea of inertia. You know, like my mom is definitely the type of person where if she doesn't know what to do in her life, she'll pray on it. And then she just waits for like a sign. And I do see some value in that as someone who prays to like dark goddesses, right? But also my ritual practice is very much rooted in action, right? That like ritual action is more important than burning the right herbs, praying to the right God, saying the right things. Like action corrects itself in the universe. Like that to me is very powerful. That's how I've operated for many years. So it gets a little frustrating to me when it's like, well, I'm just going to pray on it. It's like, or you could do something about it. And if you don't like it, do something else, you know, like prayer is grounding and meditation, I think is very powerful. But when it's a substitute for like the real things that you can do, it's like, oh, come on, you could pair the two things together. That's fine, you know? So
Exactly.
yeah. And on the other hand, like I understand if something is really difficult and you don't know what to do, okay, pray on it, get centered, get focused, and then let that inform you. But also sometimes you just got to get out there and pound the pavement if you want to make a change in your life or in the world, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember doing like a follow-up in my Akashic records and then asking the same kind of question. And I did get like, as someone noted, like, hey, when you read them, eventually you're going to come across the sassy one. I'm like, yeah, that sounds right. Okay, so here we go. But yeah, it's like, what did you even do? It's like, why is this not progressing? It's like, because you're in your own way. What have you done? Like, excuse me?
Rude.
Like, I'm not burning the good incense for you to be mean, okay?
Oh my God, thank you. Exactly. Right.
Right. But I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
What am I
totally.
actually doing?
What am I actually doing? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm only a little familiar with the Akashic Records. If you wouldn't mind just talking a little more, I mean, mostly for my benefit, but also for the
Yeah.
audience about
Sure.
what that experience is.
Yeah, so they've basically always been around. It's
Mhm.
like a supercomputer, like a mega library, like the cloud infinite sort of thing.
Mm.
It is a really good way for someone who's beginning or interested in mediumship to kind of dabble and see if that is receptive to them, because there is a little bit of a toolkit, like a sequence you can follow to kind of make it a little bit more easy to jump in.
Yes.
But there's a pathway prayer and there are record keepers that are kind of helping you get in. It's comprised of masters, teachers, and loved ones. So different iterations of like ancestors. They could take many forms. Different people have different kinds of ways of internalizing energy or viewing energy in general. So this has been kind of uniform. One person who read my records picked up on like a lot of organic, not really like sharp lines, like amorphous shapes. The first person who read mine picked up on like, they don't really look human. They kind of look like when you do a cast of someone's face, like a sculpture, and then you were to like squish the like compress it or like move the clay around and then go, okay, we're done. Like that kind of thing. And it's like they're I did read for someone who had very chatty MTLOs, like master teachers, loved ones, etc. I, when reading for someone else, did end up kind of like drawing cards or breaking at my pendulum to kind of like get some direction of like, I think you're saying this, is this right? And then I'd be like, no. Like, okay, well, I need more than this. And then I kind of pulled, but part of that is like also the questions you ask. They could tell if you're asking the wrong question.
Oh, yes.
And they will straight up say like, I don't want this question anymore. or they'll be very abrupt, like, here, bye. But yeah, the best questions are what, why, and how.
Okay.
So that creates a lot of room for a message that you need to hear versus like trying to extract it, because it's not there for you to manipulate. It's there to teach you what you need to know.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah, it's really lovely. And
Yes.
it's so important to, in life, everything like grounding after is so important.
Of course. Yeah.
Because yeah, for me in particular, I feel like when I go and I do the pathway prayer, it's like one of those double exposure photos where you see like two things, like you kind of shift over, like things kind of shift over a little bit. Everything still looks fine, but like,
right.
I remember the first time I read mine, I thought my parents were like cooking fish because like it smelled very salty.
Funny.
So
yes.
I went to investigate.
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm like, I've never done this before. Like, let me see what's really going on around me. So I went downstairs like real quick, and they hadn't eaten anything. Like there was like rice going, beans, and I'm like, that's not salty enough to like no, like salt water, like the brine of like a clam or something.
Yes, right.
That is what like rushed in. I'm like, oh, that. And there have been a few other things that have come up with me around like water and depths and everything.
Yes.
And yeah. And the reason why I say in particular, like, you don't need to do the chant to like go and get in, is looking back now, I'm like, oh, that's basically what I was doing when I did a saltwater float.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yep.
Cool.
It's like the way it all came in, and the things that were talking to me about what I should actually focus on. Because if I look back on that and I look at what I'm doing now, it's like, oh, you're telling me the same thing over and over again.
Yes. Right. Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
yeah.
Amazing. Go float.
Yeah. Go float.
It's like, it's so much magnesium, you will feel so good, even if you don't like ascend in the moment.
Of course.
So, yeah. Spiritually beautiful, physically also great. Like go do it.
Exactly. Especially since most of us are magnesium deficient. So like it really can only help you.
Oh yeah.
It's so funny though to hear you talk about that sassiness with the Akashic Records, or that bluntness, or that I'm not answering this question, because that's the tarot for me. Like especially now that I've developed more of a practice with it, and it's like it can get very sassy with me. So I will typically only read for myself now when I'm ready for it, especially when I really know what I should be doing, but I'm not doing it. And then if it's a friend of mine I've read for, I love it because the cards will just get progressively sassier. It's like, oh, I know you can handle this. You're friends, so you're going to get this. And that's my favorite experience too, when like the somebody asks a question and the cards respond totally differently, because they're just like, we're not answering this. This is what you need to be focusing on, not this. Like that's incredibly powerful too, but you have to like be able to see it for what it is, and not just try, like you said, you're not trying to manipulate it. You're not trying to force it into a particular box. You're looking at what is being told to you, and you're like, okay, this is telling me I have to go in a completely different direction. What I'm focusing on is a waste, like, and it is not in my best interest, I guess.
Yeah. And what's so beautiful too about like the ethics of it is Linda Howe's book on Akashic Records, like 101. She gets into like, you shouldn't read for anyone under 18. You should not, like, it's not a one size fits all, but like, you shouldn't consume any substances within 24 hours of opening yours or other people's. And I never felt like testing it. I just kind of took it as like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But someone recently asked me like, why? And a few things kind of come up. I've heard one person say, when she asked that question, like, why can't I have wine? And then open my Akashic Records. And they said, like, first of all, you don't really like to drink wine, so why would that even be a question? Secondly, we in particular like can't speak for everyone's like masters, teachers, etc.
Yeah.
But it's the urgency, like you shouldn't be coming and asking these questions if you are coming from a place of like desperation. It should be because like you're truly in a self-reflective, open place, because you're going to be doing that like grabbing at like, you're not telling me what I want to hear.
Exactly.
Like,
yes.
I don't want to hear about how you see a black bear in the field with a goldfish. Like, like one of two things could be happening. Either that's irrelevant for you to pay attention to, and I can try to work through this with you.
Yes.
Or they're telling you to fuck off.
Literally that. Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm like, come back later when you're ready. Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said with tarot, like I have done the thing of like doing a reading right before I do an Akashic record reading for myself. And it's interesting how similar yet more expansive. Like it's like the difference between, I feel like tarot is sometimes like reading an essay, like a listicle of like, here's the progression potentially.
Yes.
And the Akashic Records feels like reading like Rilke or like a poem.
Oh,
it's like some things are very clear and some things you're like, that sounds so good. What does it mean?
Of course.
Like, wow, what beautiful nonsense you said. Like, I don't know. Thankfully, like people say that initially, and then as they keep going, they're like, oh, and then they bring up like, oh, these are like icons I identify with, or like these are constant like themes with me.
Yes, right.
But yeah, my constant theme seems to be water, which is very interesting because there's very little water in my natal chart as well.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
I have a Capricorn stellium. There are 6 placements in there.
Oh my God, what?
Yeah. Sag Sun, Virgo Moon, Libra rising, and then like a traffic jam of Capricorn energy.
Incredible.
Yeah. My oh, I was gonna say Ramona.
Yes.
She was the first person to ever read my natal chart. And she's like, wow, you have such good work ethic. And I'm like, thanks.
Yeah.
Painfully so.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I am I'm working with a mentor right now, because this is the control version of me doing mediumship. But as I realized with like working with my stuff with my dad and reflecting on a few other experiences, I'm like, I keep accidentally doing astral work.
Yes.
And maybe I should figure out how to better manage that.
Yes.
Because I also tend to see things, but more so like in areas of like higher energy. Like Tim and I got married on All Souls Day, so we obviously then our first year anniversary went to Midlothian for the Bachelor's Grove Cemetery.
Oh my God, amazing. Yes,
it's an incredible place.
Yes.
Very easy to miss because I drove past it twice.
Oh sure.
I'm like, where is it? I'm like, oh, I gotta walk down this like long scary path to find the haunted cemetery. Okay,
sure.
Like, happy anniversary. Here we go. But yeah, just like I know that there are like these stills that I've seen from the movie Midsummer, where if you look in the trees, you see like her sister's face and everything, or you see that in like other parts. And I'm like, oh, that whole cemetery for me is like that.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a dude. He doesn't want me to keep looking. Okay.
Wild.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. I'm going to go stand by this pond, but only this place because that feels weird.
Right. Wild.
The whole place is like really something. And I don't know what it is in particular. I've done some research, but maybe other people know more about like cemetery history that listen.
Yes.
But there were all of these headstones that had like little dolls, like different figures on them. I'm used to seeing like coins, but
of course
there were like little toys everywhere.
Wild. Okay.
And yeah, I knew it was time to go when I saw a bunch of them like get knocked over at the same time and there was no wind. And I'm like, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah. Bye,
Yeah.
friends. I'm out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
It's
my
when the big
God.
Portillo's open on Addison, and I'm like, oh, it's time to go get a hot dog.
Yes, it is.
But we're grounding time now.
Grounding time.
Oh,
Oh my God.
but yeah, the place has insane energy.
That's
Like
wild. Yeah.
there was a cluster of leaves that just kept following us across the path, across the street, into the parking lot that we were in.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, something crossed the street with us. I hope
Yeah.
it doesn't. Like, I'm like, you're like, please don't come.
Yes, exactly.
I did a
Yes.
quick like siren moment, like, I did not agree to any of this. Please get
Yes.
out of my Honda.
Yeah.
Unless you're gonna make this old car work better. Like,
Of
because I traded it
course.
in last year. I'm like, unless you're helping us like get to Chicago proper,
Yes, exactly. Right.
you don't get to stay. No.
It's good to set boundaries with that kind of energy. Yes.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I've had that moment at least, but that's something I mentioned to my mentor, like, hey, this stuff keeps happening. She's like, yeah, that you should work on that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know. Like I do crystal singing bowl, like sound bowl meditations as
Yes.
well. And you even see this in like my human design, like body graph. Like I have nothing to ground me. I am all like head space, activated throat, over not over processed, but like overstimulated, like third eye and crown. So like it's all downloads. Nothing to tether me.
Yes. Right.
So, yeah, like this is not sustainable. Like no wonder I keep burning out every 3 days.
Oh my God. Well, of course, exactly. When it's just this constant flow of information and sensory information, right? Because if it were just intellectual, it would probably be something you could compartmentalize a little more. But when it's those physical, those bodied feelings and information, it's just like, oh, this is too much. This is way too much.
Right.
So yeah. Figuring out.
Are you aware of human design or ever like gotten into that?
I've vaguely heard of it. Yes.
Understood.
Yes.
It's very popular in the like, you're a professional witch and you've taken some classes, so then you hear about it through somebody else, and now you're really into it now.
Of course, yes.
Which was me. Yeah, but yeah, it's really interesting. Like it looks like it blends chakra and a few like astrological pieces, and it's really like an amalgamation.
Oh, cool.
And there are 5 types, so it's a little bit easier to kind of like wrap your mind around like what could be the differences between all of them.
Sure.
I'm a projector, which is like 20-ish% of the population. And within that is like I am self-projected, because you have like the 3 things are like your type, your authority, your strategy. So projectors are like, you weren't meant to like do capitalism. Like you really were not meant to like work a 5-day work week. You're supposed to like, you could have a full day, like a 12-hour day, and then the next day you do nothing. And I'm like, that sounds right.
That sounds very right. Yeah.
Like that sounds correct to me. Yeah, there's generators, manifesting generators, reflectors, and manifestors. And each one has like something to teach the other one.
Oh yeah.
My strategy is waiting for the invitation. It is why I think I suck at pitching myself.
Oh yes.
I can't do that. Like the cold email, like the cold call, like unless you explicitly say, hey, Emmy, I need you to do this thing. It's like, okay, I've arrived.
Yes.
Otherwise, like a big projector problem is like, you feel bitter because you went and you tried to like solve a problem that nobody asked you to solve. And they're like, what are you doing?
Yes.
Like, get out of my space.
Yeah, right.
or they heard what you said, but they weren't ready. And now they're like, F off. Like, I don't want to deal with you. So it's all about finding the people that are like, hey, you got juicy stuff to like guide me through. Please help.
Yes.
Like, I need that.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'm so glad you asked me. Like, do you have 3 hours? Oh,
exactly.
like just waiting. Like, and yeah, the authority piece for projectors, like this is only a projector thing. To be self-projected is like, I learn what is correct, or I am able to discern what I should be doing by talking out loud.
Gotcha. Yes.
Whether it's like moments like this where I'm like, oh, I know exactly what I want to say to Vanessa.
Yeah, right.
Like, here we go. That seems right.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I should have been doing. Or getting stuck on like a few things, like I told you, Squarespace. I'm like, I don't know exactly how she works. I know a little bit more than I did last time we talked.
That's great. Yes.
But I'm like, I don't know if this color works or that color works. I feel like this says this, but it says this. So actually, I answered my own question. I will choose the red instead.
Yeah.
So it's like being like, I feel like the pinball machine, like I'm bouncing around.
Of course.
And then I just kind of like, oh no, I actually like, I got it. That's not what I should be doing at all. So it's really powerful stuff, because if I think about the things that happened in my life, that were really pivotal, and were like, oh, I'm in alignment. Like I was on a podcast talking about being a death doula, and then that podcast led to me being asked to another podcast because they heard me on it.
Oh, sure.
And then I was asked to be in a documentary because they heard me on both podcasts.
Yes.
And then like it all builds, and I'm like, okay.
You're right. Yeah.
But then when I go and like I spend hours like, I think this is what people want on Instagram, I'll do whatever. And then like it gets 4 likes and then nobody cares. Right. And it's like, you know, like I can't be doing the most. Like, no. When I think about like, oh, I should give people the bare minimum as far as like a pitch goes, and just share what I like to do.
Yes.
Or like, hey, here's what works for me. Or hey, I wrote a thing, read it if you want. So
yeah, right. Exactly.
That feels so antithetical to like everything I learned growing up. Like that's so anti-capitalist in its own way. It's not even me being like, I'm a radical. It's like, no, everything about my energy and everything else is like, no.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're not built for that, again, you know, you mentioned being a death doula, like that is a grounded, like, again, everything you're talking about, like your practice and who you are is grounded and not part of the grind, right? Where it's like, you know, pitching and fakery. And I'm just like feeling this idea of like high pitched kind of squealing, right? Like that to me is capitalism, of just like screeching into the void and like, money, we need it. And your whole thing is just like, no, we're going to be present here right now. I'm going to have a conversation with you. We're going to be here in this moment. Like that, again, that radical affirmation of the personal and the subjective. I think that is ultimately anti-capitalist. If that, it doesn't matter if that's what your intention is or not. It is not serving capital. So it's serving yourself and the relationships in the moment. Like that's just inherently good praxis, right? Like just being present, listening, paying attention. Yeah.
And you know, I was here shuffling for a while because it felt like part of why I love tarot is because I need to busy my hands.
Yes.
I've often joked like there should have been like ADHD police like around growing up, because like there were just so many screaming signs.
Yes.
One of them is like the nail biting, good grades but messy room, and awful penmanship, like A's, C, and like writing, like physical writing.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, this is going to be useless in a few years. And that was right. Just not in the way that I thought it would be.
Exactly. Exactly.
I thought it would meant that like, I'm going to be print writing. I'm not going to be cursive writing everything. It's like, no, computers will take over.
That's it. Exactly.
No.
Yeah. Who writes anything anymore? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like I did a journaling workshop recently and that felt so good, but I'm
Yes.
afraid to look at what I wrote because I'm like, I might not be able to read it.
Of course. Of course.
So I'm like, damn, should I have brought in a tablet but not hooked up to the Wi-Fi?
Oh my God, right.
Yeah. So I'll cross that bridge later.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I wanted to kind of do a little temp check on things.
Mhm.
But I drew and I'll show them too. I'm not
Sure.
like scared to show my cards.
Yeah, no problem.
10 of Swords. I got the King of Pentacles and the Six of Pentacles.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I felt drawn to the vibe of your podcast felt really appropriate for the Somnia tarot deck.
Oh, yes.
Oh, are you familiar? with
Yes,
the-
I am.
Okay, good. I was gonna say
Yes.
like I love talking to people about it, but
Of course.
yeah, I love his work so much.
Yes. Wow.
But yeah,
Yeah.
oof.
Right.
So yeah, that feels like the collective feeling.
Yeah, that's the present moment, definitely.
That is the present moment. We got our king there.
Yes.
Oh, these are so good. Ugh.
Yes.
Someone asked for a reading once and I just kind of stared. They're like, is it a lot? I'm like, no, they're just so pretty.
They're just pretty.
Like, I'm sorry, I got distracted. Okay, focus.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
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 It's been bad.
Yeah.
We are crispy.
It's yeah.
That's my beyond burnout word is crispy.
Crispy. I love that. That is accurate because burnout was a year and a half ago. And it's that running on empty, running on fumes, like burnt out to the point of being crispy. Like it's that sharpness too. Again, the 10 of Swords, right? Just like everything is sharp. And that's what it feels like most human interactions. I'm so grateful I'm not working in retail right now because it had become a nightmare by June when I finally quit, like dangerous, and again, all these crispy people who are just taking it out on everyone else. And it's like, no, take a moment, ground yourself, figure out what you're actually mad about and who deserves that anger, right? It's not the person behind the counter who has nothing to do with, the thing that you want being out of stock. And it has everything to do with the people on top who are not protecting. They want power, but they don't want to rule, right? Because like proper like leaders lead people, protect people. Like it's about being like it's caring about your group, right? It's your community. And then that grief too of just like, oh, the community leaders at the highest levels have totally like abandoned their positions of power, abandoned any pretext of caring about people. And that shock and that grief and dealing with that too. Like, okay, like those are all valid forms of grief. Sit with it. Don't attack other people because of it. Like feel the devastation. It sucks. It sucks to feel like you've lost everything. But you have to sit in it or else you're never going to get over it. Not that anyone gets over it, but you'll never learn to carry it. And B, you're going to hurt a whole bunch of people who are already hurting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You never get over grief. You just learn how to integrate it and you figure out what it means to live with that.
Yes. Right.
Because it's a series of disruptions.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like you just keep having to relearn who you are over and over again. And like you said, if you're not doing that work of all of that, then you're just going to keep like you said, like you're made of shards at that point, and then you're just kind of taking everybody down with you. It's like you're cutting people and you don't even realize it.
That's it.
You have
exactly.
no idea.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I have I've been putting this off for a while and I realized like there's never going to be a convenient time to do this. But in the before times, I had conceived of
a kind of grief meetup, not quite like a death cafe where it's like free flowing. I'm like, I need structure.
Yes.
Like I prefer for there to be structure, because my fear around that kind of thing is like introverted, neurodivergent people.
Yes.
The in-person experience like that tends to favor the extrovert that's used to kind of taking it more space.
Yes.
So
right.
I'm like, no, it needs to be more facilitation.
Yes,
like,
of course.
Steer more than you're used to, kind of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, I had the parlor and the before times, and that felt really good.
Yes.
But it still wasn't quite like, I was still going through a lot myself. So it never felt like it was what it really could be.
Yes.
In my mind. And I've transformed it again, like Emmy and the water stuff is like the Wharf is the new name. And I like this idea in terms of like, it's going to be many kind of like docking places. Like we will continue to be virtual. So
yes.
it can be a virtual option for all of us. There's just the reality of like, we can eventually come back together, but I'll figure out what's safest around that.
Yes.
And yeah, just like this mindset that we're like all passing ships right now, and we're all like waiting around, and everything feels so inconsistent and dangerous. And like the waters are really rough, but they're not always that way. So let's just kind of like grind together, like ground down in that moment and just be present. And yeah, it feels better. Like I feel better about it than I did before. Like I can't really qualify it, but something feels different about being able to effectively lead that kind of space now than it used to be. But maybe it's the fact that we're openly talking about grief now as a society.
There is that, right?
So maybe it's less of like the crickets I hear sometimes when I'm leading like anti-racism events that I do. It's like, hey guys, what do you think about the movie? Silence. I liked this. Please talk to me.
Yes, exactly. So
yeah, I think there's more of like the structure of it being like, it's not just about the grief of like loss of somebody, it's the grief of everything.
Yes, right.
So I think it's more universal. It's more like, what's the word? Transparently universal, because I knew back then, like this is a universal experience, but not to everybody.
Yes, right.
I remember I had a roommate in college who was like, all of my grandparents are still alive. And I'm like, oh, he's like, I've never really had anyone who's died that I've known. I'm like, oh, you should figure that out. Like you should begin to think about that, because you're not going to be ready. Like, no one's ready.
No one's ever ready.
No one's ever ready. But like the fact that you're like, I'm deliberately trying not to think about these things, and kind of trailing off with that conversation. I'm like, you should maybe think about that, even from the standpoint of like, write your own eulogy. Like I want to host a workshop sometime this year where like we do that.
Oh, I love
as
that.
An exercise. And it's like, just think about that. And they're like, oh, I have feelings now. Like, I think you did. You just didn't know how to like get to that place. And now we could do that together.
Exactly.
Like, oh, you poor baby.
I mean, I was gonna say like 2 years in a pandemic has got to be like baptism by fire for a death doula. You know, not that you weren't present and aware already, but oh boy.
Truly. Yeah, there's a lot of loss there for a second for me anyway.
Right.
Like in April of 2016, the 20th, my grandmother died, my dad's mom. And then as we're getting ready for her service, we got the call that my mom's dad died. So my grandfather died the day of her service. So I felt the pull between both families, and I felt just like the, like weird Emmy suddenly became useful to everybody. So it's like, hey, you do that death thing. Can you not say it that way though?
I mean, honestly, right?
I'm like, I'm not the Grim Reaper, I promise. Like
Right.
yeah, let you know something I don't. But
Yes. Right.
yeah, like, but tell me your problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, sort of like that happened. And then like the person that I feel like this is how I would want to process publicly, like when Ed
Yeah.
was doing all the comics around it.
Yes.
And like I like remember saving so many of them and as my own processing process. And I'm like, that is how I would like to externalize it, because like we all live on social media. So I feel like,
yes.
well, how am I going to deal with that? I don't see myself just like quietly, like, not quietly, but
Sure.
like if I knew that there's something going on with me, I don't see myself hiding it.
Right.
And then just kind of like, oh, now there's like a post that somebody like who had my Facebook credentials, like when I died, like,
yes.
hey, by the way, Emmy's dead. Like,
right.
Like, what, there is something wrong with her?
That,
Like,
exactly that. Right.
No.
Well, and it's, I feel like there is like the conversation around illness in American society is so fucked, because this idea that like that physical illness and moral illness are somehow correlated, right? So that if something bad happens to your body, it's because there's something evil reflected in your soul, or deficient at the very least, right? But there's a judgment placed. And even when people are sick or they pass away, the first question, what happened? How did they die? Why did they die? You know, and it's like, on the one hand, I get it, because people are trying to like do the magical thinking thing of like, well, if I can avoid this, then I will somehow avoid death.
Right.
It's not how it works, but I see where that knee jerk, that visceral, just like, I don't want to think about this. What can I do? You know?
Yeah.
But it is, I think, a disservice to not communicate these things, because it helps people reflect on their own experiences. Like I'm very, especially now, very open about grief, very open about trauma, because we're all dealing with it. And we all feel, I won't say all, I think we're raised to believe that something is wrong with us if we're having these feelings or these experiences. And it feels very alienating and very isolating. And to come out and say, like, again, to talk about grief, to talk about trauma, to talk about mental illness. Like as soon as I was on Lexapro and it changed my life, I told everybody, I'm like, guess what? Lexapro changed my life. Like, oh, I don't have panic attacks anymore. What? I didn't think that was possible. You know, there are these things, and there's nothing wrong with seeking, like recognizing a problem, seeking help for that problem, and then telling other people. You know, it's not like, if people are on the fence about medication, I'm like, try it, it might help. But I just let people know what my situation is, so they don't feel like they have to be alone in their situation, not communicating about it. Because again, to get political, that's capitalism, right? It's individual people thinking that they are suffering alone, when there are national, societal, global issues at play, and everybody is experiencing some version of this. And once we all talk and come together, we realize it's a social problem, not an individual problem. And then you can work on changing it and changing the factors in play that are affecting all of this. So it's always better to honestly communicate what your experience is, I think. Yeah.
We're really good at pathologizing what's called negative emotions.
Yes.
When in reality, it's like, they're not good or bad.
Yeah.
What ends up being the case is like, if you go and you start hurting people because you're not dealing with what's going on.
Yes.
Because like anger and rage are incredibly informative feelings. Like sadness is informative. It's like, would you, you know, it ties to so many things that we like, the diet culture conversation, like hunger is bad. And I'm like, I miss being hungry, because like my like between medications and like orthorexia, and I'm like, I'm just now getting an appetite back, and I'm like,
Oh
I
gosh,
can listen to my
yes.
body again. That's an amazing
Yes.
feeling. Like
Yes.
that's all it has to be, is like
Mhm.
recognize that you have feelings.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, well, what a concept.
I know.
But yeah, like, and I appreciate
Yeah.
what you're saying too. Like, it's been beautiful that we have social media in these moments, because it's so easy to treat, you know, a country like a monolith, like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm conflating government with people. And I'm like, no, the people don't like this.
Yes,
Like they don't
right.
want to deal with this either. Like,
Yes,
because they also realize the impact it'll have on them too.
of course.
It's like, oh, if they want to come to America, like, are they now like all Russian agents? Like, or they could be
Right.
tired of being poor
Uh,
and looking
mhm.
for a job, you know,
Yes,
in their field here. Like,
exactly. Yes.
not everything is like bogged down in any of that.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's the saying that I shared, like, when elephants like roll in the grass, like when elephants like fight, like the grass suffers. And I'm like, yep,
Yes,
that
exactly.
one.
That I know. I saw that. I felt that in my soul. Just, yeah, this is what's
Oh,
happening. Yes. And this idea that it's just like a handful of elephants and the rest of us are grass, you know. We don't want that. We just want the sun.
right.
Yeah.
I was just trying to chill.
Yeah, right.
Like, I thought we had enough problem. Enough problem.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, we have pandemic problem.
Yes.
We have supply chain problem, climate
Mhm.
change problem. Like,
Mhm.
you gotta, why you gotta do the most? Like,
Thank you.
who
Right.
needed this right now?
Exactly.
Or like racism, period. Like, I'm
Yeah.
tired.
Of course. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Of course. Yes. I know. And I've been seeing lately, like, you know, because when I started Panparacon, uh, like we were very intentional about, we want to create a space where people can feel safe, because there is so much racism, ableism, transphobia, misogyny in the occult and paranormal spheres. And it's like, really, 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 again, that's my like political theory background kicking in. I'm just like, are you serious? You're just going to replicate these systems of oppression in these fields that should be opportunities to like break things open and try new things and be new ways. Like,
Right.
again, we have enough problem. Don't make problem here.
While you make more problem for.
Yeah, why you make more problem? Bad.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
That's all unsurprising to me as
Yeah.
a queer Puerto Rican witch.
Right.
Yeah, because I felt it in both ways. It's like an extension of the ni vi aquí ni vi allá. Like, none of you want me, apparently.
Yeah.
Because I ended up not really gelling with Santeria when I was trying to practice, because like I knew, like, well, this is a tradition that should in theory belong to me. Let me see
Yes.
where the journey goes. And I'm like,
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
not for Emmy. It's like, I remember thinking while I was, you know, taking care of something, like, I'm like, okay, these are no longer for me. I'm doing the proper ritual to like separate and everything.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, like, I'm just so tired of packing up the apartment and moving. Like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And then I went and had a concussion. And like an hour later.
Oh my God.
So then I didn't have to worry about packing to move anymore.
Oh my God.
As I was concussed.
Of course.
And I'm like, this is not the tradition for me, because y'all are mean.
Yeah.
Like, this was aggressive.
Yeah, a little too direct, right?
Yeah. Like, not like that.
That's
Again,
brutal.
it's like, you know, like, fine question, but can you like lower your voice?
Oh my God.
That was my whole, yeah, like that energy. It's 2021 for sure.
Oh my God, of course.
But yeah, we so that happened. And then I know, like, the whole like Gardnerian Wicca kind of thing, I know has been historically gatekeepy.
Yep.
And so it's like, so the Yoruba tradition didn't want me, and this is the other tradition. It's like, where's my seat? Like, where am I allowed in?
Yes, exactly.
So,
yeah,
it's been a process.
of course.
To make sure I'm also not being appropriative of anything.
Yes,
And
right.
figuring out like what is actually universal
Yes.
or in tune with like the land that I'm on now that's for everyone. So it's like,
yes,
you know, native sage, not for me, because I am not, I do need to look up like in Puerto Rico, like what grows there.
Oh yes,
There is all this similar stuff that can grow there. So it's like, okay, those are fine for me.
Yeah, of course.
White sage, not for me.
Right.
Yeah, Palo Santo. There's some like gray area there within Latinidad. So there's like a little bit of like, maybe it could be fine, but I don't like go and buy a whole box of it anymore.
Totally. Yes.
It's like, no, like this holy wood should be for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. So I went through that whole process. Like what of this could belong to me?
Yes.
And it's been really powerful to like mix my anti-racism work with that.
Yes.
And also like helping people like, there's stuff that belongs to you that you can do. So here, let me show you your lane. enjoy that.
I love that. That's so here is your lane. Yes.
Right. It's like when you're at the DMV and I'm like, oh, let me help you because you're slowing down the traffic.
Exactly.
But hurry up.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah, it's been something.
Of course.
Yeah. It's been interesting to learn to internalize that I'm not the kind of guide or teacher or anything that I'm used to seeing in spaces. Yes. So giving myself permission to allow myself to be different.
Yes.
And, you know, figure out what it means for me to embody leadership has been really important and powerful. And yeah, I feel like I am becoming more me because I'm letting myself do things as opposed to like cultivating something.
Yes.
Like, I got to learn how to be that. I'm like, I'm already that. There's just some like a screen there that I have to like figure out like, how do I rip this thing off?
Yes. Yes. I love that.
That was a less heavy sigh.
Yes, I know. That was a present good thing.
Like, we are here.
Yes.
We are 6 of coins.
Yes, exactly.
Like, we're having a time, but there's like opportunity to begin giving back. And it's coming closer than a lot of us think. Yeah. There's room for control and there's areas of control that we have. Yes. That I feel like, oh, we can't do anything. I'm like, we can do things. Yes. Maybe we cannot single-handedly stop the war that is brewing before us.
Exactly. Yes.
But everybody has something.
That's it. Yeah. Right. Right. We can all contribute. Yeah. I love, like, especially for activists, like you don't there's a want to do everything, but it's physically not possible to do everything, but you can do something. Just do something consistently. And if everybody is doing something consistently, like, of course the world will change, but we all got to do it, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. But before I let you go, is there anything that you want to promote? Anything that you want people to follow you online or take some classes?
Yeah. So I will pretty soon be updating my Instagram handle, but my website is Soy Emmy. SOYEMMY.com. And that is where I will have all sorts of information about like the Wharf, which is going to be my grief collective that I'll be hosting. I have an Ostara, so spring equinox ritual coming up shortly here because I do like to honor the equinox solstice kind of spots here. And yeah, I'm trying to get back into writing. I do a workshop, so I know I want to build out for the year ahead, but I'm just taking it one day at a time.
Yeah. Trying
to take care of myself, be present. But yeah, I'll keep people posted there.
Yeah, please. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Yay.
Thank you.
So good to see you and talk to you.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening and or watching, depending on where you found this podcast. You can find Emmy at soyemmy.com. I'm also going to put all of our social media links in the description. If you're interested in following Personal Pans, you can find me on Instagram or on Twitter at Personal Pans. I am perpetually on Twitter at KALI Butterfly. If you want to be on the podcast, if you want to talk about weird stuff, feel free to reach out. My DMs are typically closed, but @tag me. I usually see those. Anyway, I hope you are staying safe mentally and physically in this very trying time. And I hope that you're able to find moments of calm so that you can have a playful and curious day.